At the time, Alex's brothers were 13 and 6, and her sister was 5. Her mother was just 35.
So she's one of the youngest in Australia to have been diagnosed.
And initially, doctors thought what she had was Alzheimer's, giving her just 5 years to live.
Which was really devastating as a teenager to think, mum's got 5 years left. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So it turns out that we think it's vascular dementia because she's had a few strokes. So every time she has a stroke, it gets a little bit worse. After the diagnosis, she actually became, her symptoms were quite bad. So I used to hate nap time. So she would get quite tired and have a nap, but every time she woke up from a nap, she wouldn't be lucid, so she wouldn't know where she was. So she has some tattoos, and she thought that people, broke into the house and tattooed her while she was asleep, and we need to catch them. That used to be really, really stressful time. And to be honest, it's really funny because this kind of relates to some of the research that I do. I actually can't remember too much before that now.
Oh, wow.
That was such a big part of my life and such a massive moment that before that it kind of just fades now.
In the months after her mother's diagnosis, Alex's mental health took a dive, and the coping strategies she was starting to cling to weren't helping.
I developed pretty bad anxiety and depression in the years following mum's diagnosis. I think what happened was I was struggling to control my life. I'd had this really traumatic, diagnosis, this event that happened, and I had no control over it. So the only thing that I could control was kind of my internal experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the compulsive thoughts were around, if you don't do this, your mum will die. So it makes a lot of sense, right? I'm facing this huge diagnosis and mum is terminally ill. That makes a lot of sense. It all fits. And so my brain was telling me that, if I don't stay completely clean, if I don't wash my hands after I touch things, then I will give mum some sort of germ, bacteria, and she'll die. So I was washing my hands a lot. I didn't touch things. I often was checking things around the house, so just making sure things were turned off, just in case, I blew up the house, which is,
Wow.
logically doesn't really make much sense, but that was me trying to control my environment so that I didn't hurt anyone.
Alex carried on like this for 2 years before she finally sought help and got a diagnosis of obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. She was 16 at this point, and she says her psychologist saved her life.
I thought that, I was just losing my grip. I thought that, I was just a weirdo, and I just thought there was something wrong with me. And seeing this psychologist, she really made me realize that there's nothing wrong with me. I'm coping as best I can. It was honestly life-changing for me, I think, seeing this woman, and she just provided this really warm, safe environment for me to just talk about everything, talk about the active grieving process as well, which was grieving someone who was alive. It's an awful, awful thing to have to do. And having someone explain what was happening and just having that kind of validation she provided for me was just honestly a game changer.
Did someone nudge you to get help? Who was in your life that was providing any support up until this point? Was it all just on your own shoulders?
It was kind of just on my own shoulders at the time. I was too embarrassed to tell any friends about it. I think that first appointment, I went through my GP and I kind of hinted that I maybe wasn't feeling very well, went to see the psychologist. And you know what? The first appointment, I remember doing the same thing. I kind of talked around the problem and she saw right through me and that's a sign of a good psychologist.
And when you said she saved your life, did you go to a dark enough place where suicidality was a thing that was, on your mind?
Yeah, I do think that she saved my life because if I had continued the way that I was going, I don't think I would be alive today.
Wow.
I think that it would have, I think I would have ended up taking my own life.
Gosh, Alex, I'm so glad you were able to get the help you were able to get. I mean, is that quite rare though? Because access to mental health care is a huge struggle in this country, let alone for teenagers spearheading their own care. Was the help you got quite rare.
I think now it is. Unfortunately, Australia is facing this huge mental health crisis, and wait times to see a psychiatrist right now are about 18 months. Luckily, back then, although I say luckily, I'm not sure if it is actually lucky. I think that people just didn't seek help back then in the same way that we do now. But back then, I was lucky enough to be seeing a GP who was bulk billed, and then my psychologist was also bulk billed. And I think that's actually
Wow.
quite rare nowadays.